The photograph inside the taxi's glove compartment was almost invisible to anyone who entered. Its corners were worn, its colors faded, its surface cracked by years of neglect. A thin film of dust clung to it, as if it hadn't been touched in decades. Yet, for those who looked closely, the image carried a weight that could silence anyone. It showed a young soldier, camouflage uniform pressed neatly, rank insignia sharp on his shoulders, a few medals gleaming on his chest. In one hand he held the American flag. In his eyes burned an intensity impossible to miss, pride mixed with responsibility. The kind of gaze that belongs to someone convinced he could hold the world together if he had to. But why was this relic buried inside an aging taxi driving the streets of Chicago at night? And more importantly, what hidden tie existed between the soldier in the photograph and the graying man currently behind the wheel? To the world, Mike Sullivan was ordinary. Mid-50s, lines of fatigue etched into his face, silver threads running through his hair. Every night he slipped quietly into the city, starting his shift with the same calm routine. He greeted passengers politely, never raised his voice, always delivered them safely. To them, he was simply the driver, nothing more. His taxi, an old sedan, reflected the same ordinariness. Not luxurious, not broken down. Worn seats, spotless interior, faint nostalgic music humming from the radio. The only unusual detail was that photograph hidden in the glove box, though hardly anyone ever noticed it. But if you watched closely, the truth leaked through. The way Mike's hands held the steering wheel firm yet relaxed spoke of someone who had once controlled far more dangerous machines. The way his eyes darted to the mirrors every few seconds left right, rear suggested habits born from survival, not city traffic. Passengers glued to their phones never saw it, but his body language told another story. That night, the city was heavy with humid summer air. Past midnight, the streets had thinned out, leaving only the echo of distant sirens and the occasional car. Mike had just dropped off a passenger near Lincoln Park and was heading slowly along Lakeshore Drive. The clock showed 2:30 a.m. Normally, he'd be thinking about heading home. But tonight, a quiet restlessness stirred inside him, the kind that whispered change was near. Then he saw her, a silhouette stumbling under the streetlights. A young woman, barefoot on one side, hair tangled, clothes torn, glancing behind her as though shadows themselves were chasing her. Panic radiated from her every movement. Mike slowed down. Something in her eyes, that raw, silent plea, triggered instincts he hadn't used in years. She threw up her arms, signaling desperately for him to stop. Without hesitation, he braked. The woman yanked the rear door open and collapsed inside. Her breath came fast and uneven, hands trembling as she clutched the seat. She turned to the window again, terror written across her face. Mike studied her through the mirror. Early 20s, frightened to her core. And then came the headlights. In the distance, 3, maybe 4 vehicles appeared, speeding toward them with the precision of predators. Their beams cut through the night, unrelenting, closing fast. Whoever they weren't just joyriding. In that instant, Mike Sullivan changed. The weary, quiet driver vanished. His jaw tightened, eyes sharpened, posture straightened. His hands gripped the wheel like a soldier grasping his weapon. The years between the photograph and now collapsed. He pressed the accelerator. The taxi leapt forward, but this wasn't panic driving. His turns were crisp, his accelerations calculated. Every move had purpose. His gaze scanned constantly mirrors, blind spots, side streets. He wasn't fleeing blindly. He was maneuvering, setting traps, buying time. This wasn't a cabbie's escape. This was combat driving. The young woman clung to the seat as the car darted through intersections. She had no idea who this man was, but she felt, instinctively, that she had stepped into the hands of someone who knew far more than he admitted. Instead of staying on the main road, Mike veered suddenly into the old industrial district. At this hour it was deserted. Empty warehouses, dark alleys, a handful of flickering street lamps. To anyone else, heading here would have been madness. To Mike, it was strategy. The photograph in the glove compartment shifted with every hard turn, sliding slightly with each jolt. The young soldier's determined stare, caught decades earlier, seemed to burn brighter in the chaos. The driver of this taxi wasn't just Mike Sullivan's Chicago cabbie. He was someone else. Someone the city had forgotten, but who hadn't truly disappeared. The pursuing vehicles were closing in fast. Mike's eyes flicked to the rearview mirror, then to the young woman in the back seat, trembling uncontrollably. Tears streaking her cheeks, hands clutched tightly in her lap. But Mike's focus remained absolute. Each intersection, every alley, every possible escape route calculated in his mind, as though a three-dimensional map of Chicago had materialized before him. At this hour, the main streets were empty. Mike turned the city's emptiness into an advantage. A normal driver might panic, racing for the nearest police station. Mike's approach was different. He abandoned the wide roads, slipping into narrow side streets, corners, and forgotten alleys. Every turn was deliberate, each decision tactical, as if he had memorized the city's veins over decades. Inside the taxi, tension crackled like electricity. Only the low hum of the engine and the tire's rhythmic friction against asphalt filled the air. Even Mike's breathing had shifted. Controlled, measured, almost mechanical. A physiological protocol activating automatically under pressure. His hands were steady, each movement precise, mathematical. Suddenly, one of the pursuers attempted to cut them off from a side street. Mike reacted instantly. A millisecond decision, a precise turn. The taxi slid past in a controlled drift, every movement executed with expert precision. The young woman gasped. Eyes wide, who was this man? His gaze was constantly shifting. Left mirror, right mirror, rear view, side windows scanning every angle, anticipating threats before they appeared. This was the ingrained behavior of someone trained to survive in hostile zones. Yet here he was, ostensibly just an elderly taxi driver. As the chase continued, Mike made a calculated decision. He veered off the main road toward the old industrial district. Abandoned warehouses, dim streetlights, empty streets, an area normally avoided at night. But a plan had formed in his mind, one that required both patience and audacity. The photograph in the glove compartment swayed gently with each turn. The young soldier's determined gaze seemed almost alive, a stark contrast to the tense present. Back then, Mike wore a uniform, carried an official weapon, executed government missions. Now, he appeared merely as a weary cab driver. They entered the industrial zone. Mike expertly slipped the taxi behind a shuttered factory, killed the engine, and extinguished the lights. Darkness swallowed them completely. The young woman's fear didn't ease. She scanned the shadows, unsure what would come next. Mike, however, radiated calm, control. The pursuers remained on the main road, realizing their quarry had vanished. Engine echoes came from afar, but safety was sufficient. Mike pulled an old keyed phone from his pocket, dialed a precise number. The conversation was brief. Coordinates relayed. Call ended. The woman finally exhaled, the tension in her body easing for the first time. Mike's professional composure was contagious, but questions lingered. Was he just lucky? Or had he faced situations like this before? 10 minutes passed before new vehicle sounds reached them. Different this time, disciplined, methodical, official. Mike's lips curved in a slight smile. Government-plated cars with dark windows had arrived. The young woman's fear flared again, until she observed Mike's serene demeanor. These were no strangers. They moved with military precision. Who was this man? Who could summon such forces? The men approached in civilian clothes, but radiated authority. Their respect was reserved for someone notable, not an ordinary citizen. The exchange was brief. Efficient confirmations, coordinates, procedural notes. The young woman was handed over safely. Fear dissolved, replaced by a single lingering question. Who exactly was Mike? How did a simple taxi driver hold such connections? Was tonight an anomaly or a reflection of a hidden past? When the officials departed, silence returned. Mike sat in the taxi for several minutes, motionless. A storm brewed within him, memories unlocking doors long sealed. His eyes lingered on the photograph, the young soldier staring back as though recognizing the man behind the wheel. Years had passed, his hair grayed, his face mapped with life's experiences. Yet some things never faded. Reflexes, body memory, the automatic systems honed during crises. Tonight, all had awakened, flawless, as if never dormant. Government-plated vehicles slid silently to a stop in front of the factory, engines humming as if ready for any emergency. Mike opened his taxi door slowly, scanning the surroundings one last time. Years of ingrained habits guided his mind, drawing an invisible security perimeter, assessing potential danger points before stepping out. The men who exited the vehicles wore civilian clothes, but every motion screamed discipline. Upright posture, measured steps, eyes alert to every detail. As they approached Mike, it was clear this was not the way one spoke to an ordinary citizen. Respect radiated in their concise greetings, confirmations, and the swift exchange of coordinates. The young woman was handed over to reliable hands. Her immediate danger had passed, yet her mind raced with questions. Who was Mike? How could a taxi driver summon official help so quickly? What history linked him to these men? And most hauntingly, were tonight's events a coincidence? Or had Mike faced such life-or-death situations before? After the officials departed, the night's familiar silence returned. Mike sat in his taxi for several minutes, motionless. A storm of emotions raged within him. Tonight had cracked open long-locked mental chambers. His gaze fell on the faded photograph in the glove compartment. The young soldier seemed to stare straight back at him. Years had passed. Gray streaked his hair. Life had etched maps across his face. Yet some things remained unchanged. Reflexes, body memory, and automatic crisis response systems. Tonight, all were alive again, as if never dormant. The taxi moved slowly toward the city center. At this hour, Chicago was nearly deserted, occasional nightclubs, patrons, and municipal vehicles the only signs of life. Mike's driving returned to ordinary mode, the tactical maneuvers now memories rather than active decisions. He had resumed the identity of a simple taxi driver, but the emotional turmoil persisted. Tonight's events transported him back decades, to missions far more dangerous than navigating city streets. Uniforms, weapons, orders, life or death, stakes memories Mike had never shared, nor intended to. Have you ever wondered what secrets lie behind ordinary faces? Perhaps a neighbor, a barber, the owner of your daily cafe? How many hidden heroes walk unnoticed among us? If you want to follow Mike's true story, stay tuned. His journey is just beginning. Stopping at a red light on the main avenue, the glow illuminated the interior. Mike studied the photograph more clearly now. The young soldier's posture was strong, gaze determined, a stark contrast to the weary driver he had become. A faint note at the bottom had been overlooked for years. Special Forces, Operation Eagle, 1995. That mission had been a turning point, transforming him from uniformed soldier to civilian lost in the ordinary world. When the light turned green, he pressed the accelerator. It was time to go home, but tonight's impact lingered. Dormant memories had awoken. Reflexes from a lifetime of operations revived. The illusion of normalcy had fractured. At home, Mike parked in his garage, engine off, and sat for a moment. He examined the photograph, the fire in the soldier's eyes still bright, undimmed by time. Climbing the stairs, he encountered Mrs. Henderson. She greeted him as usual. Mike smiled politely. Claiming an uneventful night, she had no idea whose life he had saved, or what skills he had displayed. Inside, he turned on the television, curious if the incident had reached the news. Unsurprisingly, nothing appeared. Such operations never made headlines, and they were never meant to. Officially, nothing had happened. Mike's gaze shifted to the dresser's framed photograph, the young soldier surrounded by his team. 8 men in desert camouflage, dusty and sunbaked, arms around each other, smiles faint but genuine. Mike stood in the center, younger, unmistakable, arms crossed with a half smile, conveying both pride and secrecy. Captain Rodriguez to his right, Sergeant Martinez to his left, each bearing scars and stories of their own. Sleep came with difficulty, and in dreams, Mike returned 25 years to Afghanistan. A hot summer night in rugged mountains. Desert camouflage weighed him down alongside a 6-man elite team. Operation Eagle, one of their most critical missions. Rescue kidnapped diplomats and neutralize a terrorist cell. Every detail of the mission was vivid in his mind. Rodriguez's silent commands, Martinez's sniper precision, Johnson's electronic expertise. Each teammate had a unique role. But Mike, the youngest, boasted the highest physical performance, unmatched in infiltration and exfiltration. The dream culminated in that critical moment, penetrating enemy lines, reaching the hostages, securing the exfiltration route, covering fire, precise coordination, 6 hours of relentless operation. By dawn, the hostages were safe, the enemy neutralized, and the team returned to base intact. When sleep finally came, Mike was transported 25 years into the past. A hot summer night in 1995. The rugged mountains of Afghanistan stretching endlessly. He wore a desert camouflage uniform, carried heavy gear, moving alongside a 6-man elite team. Operation Eagle, one of the most critical missions of that era, aimed to rescue kidnapped diplomats and dismantle a terrorist cell. In the dream, every detail was razor sharp. Captain Rodriguez's silent hand signals, Sergeant Martinez's sniper precision, Specialist Corporal Johnson's electronic monitoring. Each team member excelled in their specialty. Mike, the youngest, had the highest physical performance scores, unmatched in infiltration and extraction. As they advanced, he felt every pebble underfoot. Night vision cast green shadows, heartbeats stayed measured, and body memory guided every motion. The team moved silently, meter by meter toward the target. Yet, nothing went perfectly. Intelligence was incomplete. Enemy numbers underestimated. Maps flawed. But years of training showed. Improvisation saved lives. Mike executed a daring maneuver alone, approaching a side building to pinpoint the hostage's location. The dream focused on that pivotal moment, slipping past enemy lines, finding the hostages, opening the secure exfiltration route. Covering fire erupted, tactics synchronized. After 6 hours, the mission concluded successfully. Hostages safe, enemy cell neutralized, team returned intact. But triumph was bittersweet. Political decisions disbanded the team. Mike faced the difficult transition to civilian life. Government priorities had shifted. Special operations were scaled down. The young operator had to navigate a new, unfamiliar path. Awakening in sweat, Mike checked the clock. 6:30 a.m. Only a few hours of sleep, yet memories felt as vivid as yesterday. Coffee in hand, he gazed at the city waking outside, reflections of a past life flooding back. Civilian life hadn't been simple. He'd launched a security firm, provided VIP protection, but the corporate world felt constraining. He tried consulting in motorsports, even teaching driving. Eventually, he found contentment as a taxi driver. But some part of the past never truly faded. The events of the previous night reawakened buried instincts. The young woman's rescue mirrored those old missions. Mike's eyes lingered on a team photograph in his cabinet. 6 friends, 6 professionals, 6 stories. Captain Rodriguez had opened a security consultancy in D.C. Martinez ran a hunting rifle store in Texas. Johnson worked as an electronics technician. The other 2 remained mysteries. Williams had fallen in another operation. Thompson's fate unclear. Some said private military work, others civilian life. Morning routine resumed, yet Mike felt different. Showered, shaved, dressed, he assumed the identity of an ordinary taxi driver. But something inside had shifted. The photograph in the glove compartment now seemed alive, a symbol of a hidden self. His first passenger, a businessman heading to O'Hare, chatted casually. Mike's eyes, however, scanned constantly. Old habits reactivated. Every ride, every street. The operational mindset persisted, quietly assessing threats. By evening, after his last fare, Mike called Sergeant Martinez. The familiar voice, unchanged by years, listened as Mike recounted the previous night. A long silence followed. Then Martinez said, "Brother, the soldier inside us never dies. It just waits." The words resonated. Memories flooded back, camaraderie under fire, unspoken bonds, trust forged in life or death moments. Martinez continued, explaining that Rodriguez sought former operators for a new initiative: high-level diplomatic protection, corporate security, training law enforcement, reuniting the old team, meaningful work, substantial pay. Sitting in his parked taxi, city lights reflecting off the windshield, Mike realized a door had reopened. 20 years of self-imposed exile, a peaceful life of routine, all altered by one night. Adrenaline, instincts, decision-making skills, they had returned, as if no time had passed. Scrolling through contacts, he found Captain Rodriguez's number. The hesitation before calling was palpable. This call would mark the end of Mike Sullivan, the taxi driver, the return of Operator Sullivan, stepping back into danger, responsibility, and purpose. The phone rang 3 times. Then, a familiar voice. "Rodriguez here." Calm authority, unwavering after all these years, ready to guide them once more. Sergeant Martinez's words echoed relentlessly in Mike's mind. The soldier inside us never dies. It just waits. After 20 years of burying that part of himself, denial was no longer necessary. He was still the same operator, just serving in a different form. The following evening, everything had changed. The photograph no longer hid in the glove compartment. Mike placed it with pride, visible to anyone curious enough to notice. When passengers asked, he answered simply, "Former military." No excuses, no evasions, just the truth. His first passenger was an elderly man returning from the hospital. The moment his eyes fell on the photograph, a smile spread across his face. "Son, were you in the service too?" Mike nodded with quiet pride. "Special Forces, sir, a long time ago." Tears welled in the man's eyes. "We sleep peacefully because of people like you, son. God bless you." Those words struck a chord deep within Mike, reviving a feeling he hadn't felt in years, the inner peace that comes from service, from protecting others. Throughout the night, more passengers revealed unexpected connections. A curious university student noticed the uniform in the photograph and asked questions. Mike shared short, powerful lessons on discipline, patriotism, and sacrifice. The admiration in the young man's eyes was unmistakable. Then, a retired colonel entered the taxi. Observing Mike's posture, tone, and driving style, he nodded with respect. "Soldier recognizes soldier, son. You're one of the Special Forces kids. No one else carries that aura." Near midnight, a call came from Washington, D.C. Captain Rodriguez's familiar voice. "Mike, is this you? Martinez told me about last night. We need to talk." The call brought an unexpected offer. A consultant position at a private security company. The chance to work with old teammates again. "Your skills are still invaluable," Rodriguez said. "It's time to become active again." Mike hung up, thoughtful. Could he return to operations after 20 years? Age, condition, family, everything needed consideration. Yet, a long-dormant fire had reignited within him. After his final passenger, Mike parked along Lake Michigan, listening to the waves, reflecting on life's turning points, the transition to civilian life after Operation Eagle, the years of adaptation, the peace he had finally found. Now, it seemed, a new chapter was beginning. He held the photograph in moonlight. The young soldier's gaze no longer felt like a memory. It was a sign for the future. Perhaps soldiers never truly die. They just serve in different forms. Mike called Rodriguez back. "Captain," he said, using the title for the first time in decades. "I accept your offer. When do we start?" A brief silence. Then joy and pride in Rodriguez's voice. "We've missed you, son. The team hasn't been complete without you. Come to DC, let's discuss details." Driving home, plans took shape. He would suspend his taxi license, relocate to Washington, D.C., and prepare for his new mission. This time, he wasn't working just for himself. He was serving his country, serving people. It was time to reclaim his true identity. At the apartment, he encountered Mrs. Henderson. "Mrs. Henderson, I'll be moving to Washington, D.C. soon. I got a new job." She looked surprised. "What kind of job?" Mike smiled. "I'm going back to my old job." Packing for the move, he placed the team photograph in his suitcase. It wasn't merely a memory, it was proof of who he truly was. And have you ever wondered what lies hidden in the pasts of ordinary people? Perhaps someone you know, your neighbor or friend, is a silent hero. Stories like these remind us to notice them, to show respect. The next morning, as Mike loaded his belongings into the truck, Mrs. Henderson watched from her window. 15 years she had known him as a simple taxi driver, and now she saw the quiet man next door, returning to a life of extraordinary service. Captain Rodriguez had been right. Once a soldier, always a soldier. Uniforms change, missions evolve, but the commitment to something greater never fades. As Mike drove toward Washington, D.C., the team photograph rested on the passenger seat, no longer hidden, proudly displayed. Chicago shrank in the rearview mirror, but memories of his taxi years stayed. Every passenger helped, every late-night conversation, every moment of human connection. His service had never truly ended. It had just taken a new form. Mike Sullivan's story concludes here, but real-life heroes continue their work quietly among us. Tomorrow, the ordinary person you meet might hold an extraordinary past. Look closely, show respect. Soldiers, police officers, firefighters, they never truly retire. They just serve differently.